So today for Gall's Question Time, with the pleasure of being joined by Michael Davies from MIT and Endeavour Partners. Hi, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good to see you. Let's kick off by getting a bit of an introduction and context from yourself on that first, please, and we'll see why we've got you on today because I've had some fascinating discussions with you in the past. So give us an
Well,
intro.
thank you for saying that. I should start by explaining the strange accent. This is what an English-educated Europeanized New Zealander sounds like after you make him live in the United States for 25 years. Um, I run a boutique strategy and consulting firm. It's now about 20 years old, which makes me feel old. And I teach at MIT and LBS, and I'm just starting a high-level doctorate at SDA Bocconi. Not just because it's in Milan, but I do like Milan. And there's four big things that we've been talking about, which are my big areas of interest, which are harnessing AI and how you do innovation faster, and how you make sure that innovation on leadership in this age of AI, and particularly leadership in the age of GPTs, the generative pre-trained transformers, which are also a general purpose technology. So one of my mantras is GPTs are GPTs.
All right, great. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for the intro on that there. And I think we're probably about the same sort of vintage and been around in this space 20 odd years. Particularly where I come at it from is how is technology changing business models and changing the approach that organizations need to take with tech. So, you've been through similar things as me, the dot-com waves,
Yeah.
electric vehicles, big data, machine learning, and now, as you said, GPTs, I think being another major transition sort of point. So,
Yes.
so could you kick us off by where you think the adoption of this, and you use the term humane sort of adoption of AI. Could you sort of elaborate a bit more on how you think this technology is going to be deployed?
Well, let me pick up on your point about I do think we're at a transition point, an inflection point. Um, and that these issues around there's some things that which make the sort of these questions about how you use them in ways that are humane, that are ethical, responsible. And I think one of them is just that very rapid explosion in awareness that happened sort of beginning a couple of years ago, which has led to much more widespread adoption and usage. There's lots and lots of people actually using them in a hands-on way, where they sort of used to be in the background in what engineers do. And that's one part of it, just more use. But I think there's a couple of other things as well. First of all, we're using them for increasingly consequential decisions. As they've become more powerful, we're not just using them to make a chatbot a little better. We're using them to make decisions about autonomous vehicles or decisions about healthcare or decisions that have big impacts on people's financial health and well-being. And we're doing that at a time when there's enormous geopolitical tensions and the sort of the verities that we might have been able to rely on have gone away. So we're confronted with, in some cases, bad actors or malicious actors. And these particular technologies, because they raise the specter of something that I thought we were going to be okay about, which was technological unemployment, mean that we've got to be very conscious of what I think of as distributional issues. Who wins, who loses.
Mhm, mhm.
And the last one, which actually I've been investing a lot of effort to try and help with, is this question about um, the particular characteristics of these technologies. Their sort of tendency to do wild and crazy things, unfortunately, to hallucinate and confabulate. And candidly, for me, one of the big turning points was a sort of a Terminator moment um, earlier this year, a very dry German paper which pointed out that these technologies will, from a statistical point of view, reflect their human creators, and they will try and deceive and evade controls and gather resources. This was around DeepSeek R1, which is the Chinese model,
Mhm.
which is programmed in any case to reflect the Chinese government's perspective. but in addition, exhibited some of these behaviors when they ran some tests on it. So
Yeah,
there's a whole variety of things, consequential decisions, technological employment, this, you know, geopolitical tension, and the characteristics of the technology.
yeah. So there's an awful lot there that's being thrown at us now with this inflection point and that really. And I've certainly seen as well, Michael, that going back when I had that aha moment when I first saw it, I thought, my word, this was like the internet. When back when I was talking about that in the 90s, it was, oh no, people online are weird. We're not going to sell direct to customers. And I had the same sort of response when people had sort of heard of GPTs. Oh, but it just hallucinates and people are always going to be in the loop. And I was going, no, you don't sort of understand how this stuff is going to change. And I suppose what I've seen over the last couple of years is, you know, getting people to put their hands on the keyboards and getting them to start using GPT. And he said, as we've seen over the last 2 years. But I suppose what I'd like to explore with you a bit more now is what do executives need to do and how do they need to do the leadership for this? Because I'm seeing pockets and individuals within organizations which are using it and using it to analyze documents and using it to write their
Hmm.
emails and using it to do research and sometimes not in a secure data environment and sometimes
Hmm.
not within processes that they should be doing. But how do you now change the business process for an organization, changing how they think about their work? How do they think about their deal flow? How do they think about their sort of stuff? Because I think it raises a lot of those things rather than just, oh, we've got a new tool. Have you got thoughts on this sort of executive checklist and how they need to think about it?
I do. And let me actually build on something you said a moment ago about actually putting the hands on. This is one of those technologies where there is absolutely no substitute whatsoever, however senior you are, putting your hands on it and actually using it.
Yeah,
Without that, you're not going to have any sort of real world grasp about what it can do well and
yeah.
what it can do badly. So I begin with that one. Um,
Definitely, you can't leave this to the IT department and
no,
you really don't have a notion about it until you get your hands on. And that's certainly what I've been trying to do in the workshops that I've been running. That
yeah.
you've got to get your hands on, and you've got to have those aha moments when it does text, when it does images, when it creates videos, and you start thinking about how you can deploy it. Yeah,
Yeah, we were working to turn around before we kicked this off. You and I were talking about the end of last week, and one of the things was we had this urgent task to do, and we used a combination of people and tech. One of our team actually has a PhD in generative AI and is extremely capable with it. And he got a whole bunch of the work done, like sort of an 80/20 thing at extraordinary speed. But we still needed the people for the last 20 piece to make sense of it, to get it in the right format. And that's one of the big characteristics. But if I was going to take a step back, I got three things. It's you've got to be strategic because at times of change, when there's new possibilities, as a leader, you've got to be, as an executive, you've got to be clear about what it is that drives your business forward. That's not going to necessarily fundamentally change. This doesn't mean a fundamental change in what you sell and to whom. It might expand it, but being clear about your strategy, I think, is the first part. Because without that, you can't make any good decisions. The second is, I think you've got to be really pragmatic. That this is people. There's going to be creative destruction. Schumpeter's creative destruction, in which new companies, new firms arise, big industry level change.
yeah,
And it's going to happen, some places it's going to happen very fast, but that change will happen even in slow moving industries. And even in what has hitherto been slow moving companies. I mean, even if it doesn't happen yet, you've got to buy the real option. You've got to be prepared for what might happen. So, what does that take? Yeah, how they work, hands on. And one of the things I'd highlight, well, two things. Let me pick up two things. You've got to be very aware of their inherent limitations. These are enormously powerful technologies with incredibly widespread impact, but they're not perfect. They're deeply imperfect.
yeah,
Um, and that means that you've got to be very mindful of the consequences. Um, and you've got to act, but at the same time, the transition is likely to be brutal. Um, and that means you've got to embed an ethical perspective. I go back to one of the things that triggered our first conversation at the very heart of the organization.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can I pick up on a couple of points on that on yours here then?
Sure.
The you talked about sort of the strategic drive and your business might not change, but if you take examples like law or consultancy or health or sort of stuff like that, right? This is not just about being able to write documents faster. This could fundamentally change and allow um, allow companies and allow individuals to do things and have the powers that would have been really expensive to have export humans to do in that before. So, do you think organizations are thinking enough that the business model in their sectors could radically change?
I don't think they are thinking enough.
Yeah.
I think some of them are, a few of them are. There are leaders. It's interesting you pick up law firms. We're struck by, so we do some work as experts, in disputes, mostly about technology, oddly enough.
Mm.
And we're struck by how different the performance of the companies that we work with are. There's a boutique firm we're working on an antitrust case in the UK with, who are very sophisticated users. And one of the big firms where we're working on a trade secrets case, again, very sophisticated users. They were confronted with having to analyze 600,000 documents.
Mhm.
And rather than throw a bunch of lawyers at it, where it just wouldn't have been possible, some very effective use of AI in that area. So, the bottom line is to pick up your point, all of the business processes will change and the career paths will change. I mean, for instance, you're just not going to need as many sort of, to pick up the law firm, associates who all they do is crank the same stuff out.
Yeah,
Um, so much of that will be replaced. It's not just coming, it's happening. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. But uh, but when I sort of had this sort of point with other people, I said, look, we're not going to get rid of lawyers. There's going to be plenty of legal cases and disputes that we're going to require lawyers for. It's just I won't need a lawyer to be able to do my or advisors to do my trademark registration or to do
correct.
to respond to some straightforward sort of stuff.
So I've got a fascinating example of this. There's a guy, I was teaching a course in AI and ethics. And in the course of it, one of the participants was a senior lawyer, actually from Argentina. And he came across from his own research a firm that is using AI to automate arbitration. Now, he really got into it. It was like he stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning on one of the courses and came back with a full legal analysis of it. But he went, now that's really interesting. It's pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I'd also like to pick up on your other point about, the AI is not perfect at the moment. It's not, it's got its shortcomings and sort of stuff like that. But a great line that was sort of said to me, and I now sort of speak out, is sort of say it's not the almighty, but it's better than the alternative.
Yes.
So
And
you
that's the point.
so
The
you can use the
benchmark.
example of the law one we just used. It's not an almighty lawyer, but it's good enough for doing a lot of the stuff that you would normally want to do. So it cuts out a lot of the drudge work, as you sort of said, and also what client I'm working with at the moment. If you need a receptionist to answer the phone at 9 o'clock in the evening when somebody has got a toothache to be able to book in their appointment or sort of something like that, you haven't got that human available, but an AI answering the phone now, checking availability, being able to interact with that patient can book them in for an emergency somewhere else or to book them in for a slot they've got on the Monday morning. So, yes, it might not be your almighty, all powerful receptionist, but it's better than the alternative of not having it.
Yeah. I echo that very strongly. As I may have said, I have a personal interest in this because my girlfriend is an orthopedic surgeon. And there's many evenings in which as we're right in the middle of dinner and she has to get up and answer the phone, and some screening there would be helpful.
Yeah.
But can I just pick up one of the things that what you were saying triggered in me? It's critical to do it from a strategic perspective rather than just to do things piecemeal and iterate forward.
Mhm.
The really big value out of things like electricity and automation came when people reimagined what the business processes were.
Yeah.
Rather than just letting them evolve, at first they went in with giant electric engines because they had steam engines. It was only when you figured out how to distribute them that we got the big payoff.
Mhm.
And what we're doing some interesting work with is people who are saying, if we had this, what would we fundamentally change in our business processes if we were to reimagine it for the world of AI?
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's a great point. So let's move on to maybe on how do we to deploy that. So talking about, middle managers, the ones who are currently running the current processes and sort of stuff like that. Where do you see those need to be reskilled, moved to, and change the people and the business processes, then building on that?
I think there's going to be really profound changes. We're going to need many fewer people doing any sort of knowledge work for which there's a good set of training data. So the question to ask yourself is, has this been being done? In which case, we can probably make good statistical predictions about what the answers will be, which is all that AI does. But now we've gathered up so much of human knowledge, that enormous, if you like, database of how people do things, it's going to have really big impacts on a whole class of knowledge workers and middle managers. And I think that it's the responsibility of leadership to be engaged with that, to be simultaneously strategic to drive the change to get people on board, but also open and candid about what's going to happen. Don't try and delude people,
Mhm.
and supportive. You've got to embrace this. We have both a practical, from your company's point of view, responsibility and a broader ethical responsibility. If you don't treat the people you have well as this transition is happening, you won't be able to hire good people in the future. There's a real significant consequence to bad behavior. And people ignore that at their peril. Now,
Mhm.
that's the instrumental view, but I more sort of also say at the end of the day, customers and workers will gravitate toward companies they see as having good values.
Yeah, yeah. So talk. Let's move on to talking about sort of the ethics and the implementation of AI. I think one of the things that I've seen, it's maybe not so much now, but going back a few months ago, I was finding that organization were just frozen, like rabbits in the headlights of we can't do this because of ethics, or we need to get all our ethics right, and the regulatory environment and all of that. There's so much uncertainty about it. But I read the book, The Coming Wave by Mustafa
Mm.
Salim, I think it's here behind me. And I think he talks a lot about regulation and can we control this? Can we control AI? Can we control sort of genetic modification and sort of stuff like that? And the conclusion was I think I read reading it was no, you can't sort of control it and really regulate it. And my reading of the book was good people need to get on and use AI for good, because if they wait for the regulation, the ones who don't listen to regulation and don't follow it and haven't got the ethics will continue anyway, and we'll have to free up resources to clear up the mess. So,
I
so
couldn't agree more.
yeah. So, what's your perspective on that, on it? After I just give my
I, I
perspective.
was at an event in Boston a couple of years ago called the Unconference, which is where you run sessions on things you find interesting. And I put this idea up that we cannot rely on governments. It's up to business leaders and organizational leaders, and sort of front and center as the rest, for precisely the reason, which is that regulation is not going to catch up. And what I would say to pick up your point, however, is there's but you don't need to be frozen. The thing that led to my new course at MIT on how you actually build this was a realization that we now know enough about it that there are people who've been doing it well, and we have some practical guidelines. we can lay out a checklist for these are the combination of things that you need to go do. 3 or 4 years ago, much harder. You could sort of talk about it at a high level, but we've now got a bunch of people where we go, look, do this. We know it works. If you put these sets of things together, you can both have the power of the innovation and do it in ways that are ethical and responsibility. And that's an important turning point, I think.
Yeah. So have you got some of that work published that can be more generally available, Michael, or have we got to sign up for an MIT course to?
You don't have to sign up for MIT courses, though I will, of course, recommend them very highly. I feel like, hi, MIT. We'll be writing a lot about that in the coming weeks and months. We've sort of been heads down working on two things, working with clients on this stuff, helping them to go do it, and also pulling this material together. For those of you who are academics, you'll know this. Pulling together a good academic course takes a big investment. Now we're building on that, and we're also got a new. I've got a new course coming out at London Business School, which is about leadership in the age of the rest, the leadership challenges. But no, we will be writing extensively and publishing.
Yeah, yeah. But I think what that gives me reflects on as well is that I feel we are where we were in late 90s, early 2000s with the internet, right? It was like, okay, right, you could do the www, you could create your URL, you could throw up a shop there, but it was quite, you know, all the coding you had to do and all the bits of where's the data and all those things weren't really structured that well. And when we first started putting things into the cloud, it was, oh no, no, I have to have things secure on my server in the office. And one of the team members took home the hard drive as your backup or whatever. And so I feel we're in that phase now with the AI, as we're sort of saying, getting secure data platforms, understanding what your data policies are, understanding how the processes are going to change, understanding how these ethics are changing. These things are all changing at the moment. But back to one of your points earlier, I think you've got to be pragmatic and start on that journey, and you will be able to get business benefits and return on investment if you start doing some of those things now, and you'll start the thinking really before some startup like Amazon comes along and disrupts the internet. As I sort of
Or,
when I give the parallels, I say Jeff Bezos did it with the internet. There's a Josephine Bezos out there, and she is going to disrupt your AI, your legal department, or whatever in this startup that's coming to disrupt your sector.
or if not a startup, one of your peer companies.
Mm,
Oh, you know what? And it's very often the sort of the second or third company in the sector who've always been trying to beat the number one, maybe the third or the fourth who go, do you know what? We have nothing to lose.
yeah.
We might as well go for this. You see a lot of these changes of the number two or number three company adopting the technology, doing so effectively, and overcoming the established number one. It's really hard if you're the number one to convince yourself you need to take the risks involved in changing the organization.
Yeah, exactly. The innovator's dilemma, and that, isn't it? And
Yeah.
changing your model. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, any more personal reflections from you, Michael, and calls to action on? And are you optimistic about these changes?
I'm a long run optimist, but I'm really worried about the short to medium run. I'm a long run optimist because I'm an enormous believer in the power of technology. I have sort of sitting here Tom Chatfield's book on wise animals, how technology made human beings what we are. The very ability for you and me to be having this conversation sitting on opposite sides of the Atlantic with enormous ease. It was a couple of clicks. And I believe there are enough good people out there that we do have agency. There are things we can do about it and that good people can shape direction. And lastly, that sort of being rational is just a better theory about this. I'm a Steven Pinker fan because he's a child of the Enlightenment. Um, I'm a believer that that combination of power of technology and good people, and that if you can tell good stories based upon sound analysis and research, we can shape hearts and minds.
That's interesting, Edge, because it's the other way around for me. I think I'm optimistic in the short term that we can get the business benefits and stuff like that. And you're not pessimistic then that the AI is going to take over the world and is going to be more super intelligent than us, and we're not going to be able to control it in that sort of longer term view. Are you more optimistic still in that time horizon?
I'm optimistic mainly because I'm pessimistic about something. So there's a really big debate about how soon are we going to get into super intelligence. And one of the interesting things I've been doing in the last few months is I've been teaching alongside a colleague called Neil Thompson at the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT. And he and I have been having a whole bunch of discussions about how fast we get there. And I'm with Gary Marcus, who writes thoughtfully about this, and Jan LeCun, who both go, look, this is a very powerful business technology, but it's not going to get us to super intelligence. And that's being pessimistic about that innovation trajectory makes me optimistic about the medium and long run. That we don't need to fear these machines because the idea that they're going to be super intelligent is still quite a long way off. In the meantime, what we should be worrying about is how we make good use of them and how we prevent or mitigate the effect of bad actors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Michael, that's been fascinating again to discuss with you and to share it with our viewers and listeners. So thank you very much, and I'm sure people will be following you on LinkedIn and other places and that for to get more of
And
the insights.
and we will be at the end of the week ramping up what we go do.
Thank
So
you very much, Michael.
thank you, Andrew. A real pleasure. Cheers.